People all over the world suffering from mental health issues seem to have one thing in common. They've all basically lost hope. The pills that were recommended as the panacea are not helping, or the side effects are actually worse than the mental health condition itself. They've tried this diet, that diet. They've tried these supplements. Nothing seems to help. It's like they're ready to give up. And I have an excellent guest on today. She's one of the few mental health care providers on the planet who is talking about an alternate solution, one that actually works, one that actually doesn't have a long list of side effects that are worse than the mental health condition itself. I am talking about none other than the brilliant Dr. Georgia Ede. Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Berry. Thank you for inviting me.
It's always a pleasure to talk with you. I think we've chatted several times in the past, and we've got a definite reason to chat today. There's a new book out called Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind. And we're going to be talking about this and what's in it, and why everyone who has a mental health diagnosis or loves someone who does needs to take a look at this book. This information, I think, is going to change the way psychiatry is practiced. You're one of the very few mental health care providers out there who's actually stepping outside the current paradigm of load the patient up with as many psychotropics as possible and keep them as numb and dumb as possible, so that effectively they just can't complain about their diagnosis anymore. I can tell by your facial expression that you are also frustrated by this. What's going on in psychiatry?
Well, psychiatry's really been stuck. It's been standing still. The biology of psychiatry, our understanding of how the brain works and what causes mental illnesses and what we're supposed to do about them, has just been at a standstill for 75 years, ever since psychiatric medicines first came onto the scene. Medicines like lithium and thorazine was the first antipsychotic. Lithium was the mood stabilizer. And ever since then, there's just been a fire hose of pharmaceuticals that have come out ever since then, aimed at all these different mental health conditions. And, we haven't really changed our way of thinking. I mean, the medicines can be helpful in some cases. Absolutely, they can be. They still have their place, but they do. The truth is, they do fail most people. And the other truth is, they don't address the root causes of these conditions. And to the point that, when we were learning about, how to be a psychiatrist, in residency, when my colleagues and I were learning how to become psychiatrists, we learned all about these, mysterious chemical imbalances in the brain, dopamine, serotonin, these kinds of chemicals. And we were taught to try to rebalance these chemicals with medications. But we never really stopped to think about, well, what is causing these imbalances in the first place? And so the beautiful, hopeful message of the book, I hope that people will take something away with it and feel empowered, is that we know now so much more about what the root causes are. And there are things like inflammation of the brain, which you can't feel, but it's there. Oxidative stress, which is like little reactive bulls in a china shop running around and damaging parts of your brain willy-nilly, and insulin resistance, which I think your viewers already know a lot about. And so we know that these are damaging to the brain and can just about any mental health condition you might have, whether it's an attention problem or a memory problem or a mood problem. It has a lot of this inflammation, oxidative stress, and insulin resistance going on. But we have to go even deeper than that. What causes those? And when we look a little deeper, we find, if we look at the modern diet, the sort of the standard modern diet, the improper human diet, if you will, lo and behold, all kinds of ingredients in that modern diet that directly, powerfully promote inflammation in the brain, oxidative stress in the brain, and insulin resistance. So these are, when you change your diet in the right ways, you can have a profound effect on the total health of your brain. And that will help you regardless of what the condition is in most cases.
And I love how you said change your diet in the right way, because you know as well as I do, there are millions of people out there who have tried to change their diet, and I call it the false choice. And so they've been, living on pizza and Pepsi and donuts and Doritos. And they're like, well, duh, I know that's not good for me, right? And so they're like, okay, I'm going to go plant-based. I'm going to drink fruit juice, fruit smoothies, and I'm going to eat whole grain bread, and nothing gets better, because essentially that's just a different style of the same diet that they were eating before, but it feels to them like that they made a change. They went and bought all new foods. They maybe threw the old food away, and they stuck to it. They spent their valuable willpower and their stamina and their energy and their money on this new diet, and nothing changed. And so I think that's why thousands and thousands of people like diet doesn't affect mental health at all. I tried the diet change and it didn't help at all. What would you say to those people who are just right on the cusp of losing all hope, like, screw it, I'll just take all the pills?
Well, first of all, they're right. They are doing everything that they're being told to do, and it's not working. So people aren't stupid. They're paying attention to the headlines, and they're dutifully going out and spending their hard-earned money and spending their time. They're buying blenders, they're buying superfoods, they're putting flax seeds in their smoothies. They're taking, they're sprinkling blueberries on top of their oatmeal. They're doing all the things that they have been told are good for the brain. But the problem is there's no science behind any of those strategies, and really all those strategies are based in research that is largely funded by the companies that are trying to sell you more of those products. So, and it's not just that the funding is, it's not all about the funding. It's about the science itself. The science itself, they're not testing whole blueberries on people with brain conditions. They're not testing glasses of red wine in people with memory problems. They're not testing the kind of dark chocolate you can buy in the store on people with depression and memory problems. They're testing very specialized, souped up products that you can't buy, that are designed to have lots and lots of extra antioxidants in them. And they're not testing the products you buy in the store have not been tested, and they will not work. So you can't just take, and this is, I know that this would be great if this were true. You can't take kind of a junky standard diet and just sprinkle some superfoods on top and hope that that's going to help you. You can't just take a junky standard diet and nibble at it around the edges, which is what the Mediterranean diet does. It kind of cuts back on a few things that aren't good for you, but it doesn't go nearly far enough. If you want noticeable change in your mental health that you can feel and other people can notice too, you have to make real change. You have to fundamentally restructure your diet from the ground up with the right information. Then within days to weeks, then most people will see real change.
Yep. And it's not because you're right. A lot of people think, well, I'm going to buy these supplements, or I'm going to start eating blueberries with whatever diet they're eating right now. There's two things to look at here, my friends. You've got to look at what should I remove from my diet, because they're causing inflammation, or they're causing this, or it's too high in oxalates. Just multiple different things that need to be removed. That's number one. But then number two is, what should I add to my diet? Because the common diet is so depleted in many vitamins and minerals, many cofactors, amino acids, and definitely fatty acids. You're just not getting enough of the ones you need. And so it's more than just sprinkling some superfood on top. It's more than just adding some supplements. You have to subtract and add, especially if your mental health hangs in the balance.
Exactly. So one of the things I say in the book is, first, do no harm, right? So take the things out of the diet that are actively, and this is not an exaggeration, this is actually what's happening, destroying your brain from the inside out. You first do no harm. And so there's the tremendous power in subtraction. And so, you want to take if you've got sort of something that's say that a boulder has landed on your foot, the first thing you want to do is take the boulder off your foot, right? And
Right.
so that kind of a way of thinking about it. So the problem with this is, and I understand, people think, how could I ever live without this, that, or the other thing? Removing things is harder. Removing things, and when we add things, it feels empowering and positive and it's easy. But taking things away, especially if they're addictive, cheap, convenient, habit, we've been eating these things since we were little kids, subtracting things feels depriving, and it feels negative, and it feels bad, and it's harder. All of that is true, but when you do it, you will be rewarded handsomely, quickly, and you'll feel so much better. In most cases, it's really motivating to see that and feel that shift happening, because most people haven't ever tried this. And so when you do it, you get these brand new feelings. A lot of people say, well, it's a different state of mind, really. And that, then you can decide, well, is this really worth it for me? Do I want, do I feel better enough to make this worth it for me? You can decide for yourself. I like to say, I'm nutritionally pro-choice. So, I'll help you optimize whatever diet you feel most comfortable eating, and giving you ideas about how to make it healthier for your brain. But only you can decide, how far you want to take it and how good you want to feel.
Yeah. And let's just jump into it, Dr. Ede. Let's just get down to it. Everybody that's watching right now, we've got 1,500 people watching, but you guys know, watching this, there are millions of people out there with mental health problems that need this information. So please hit the thumbs up right now and share this video on your favorite social media. You could literally save someone's life and improve the life of many, many people. So let's just get right to it, Dr. Ede. What should people eating an average diet, what do they need to start removing from their diet right now to improve their mental health?
The two big ones are refined carbohydrates, sugars, flours, cereals, fruit juices, and refined fats, especially the vegetable oils, the soybean oil, the sunflower oil, the canola oil, all of the vegetable oils, so-called vegetable oils. They're really refined seed oils that come out of oil refineries. There's nothing natural about them. So refined carbohydrates and refined fats. So the first step is whole foods principles. That's step number one.
I love it. And so all the sugar needs to go. All the grains need to go. Even the whole grains, even the ancient grains, all that stuff is contributing to, first of all, hyperglycemia, hyperinsulinemia, but secondly, to inflammation. I take it you're saying. And then the vegetable seed oils, we've only been eating them for 50 to 100 years out of our millions of years of being on this planet. So that nobody should find controversy there. That should make perfect sense. I love to follow the adaptation hypothesis from biology, that something that a species has been eating for a long damn time is probably good for them. And we've only been eating grains for a few thousand years. Added sugar is only a few hundred years. And then the vegetable seed oils, 50 to 100 years. Before that, no human had ever put them in their mouth, ever. Okay. What should people start adding to their diet in order to see mental health improvement in days to weeks?
This depends on, what they're eating right now. But if you are not eating enough protein, specifically enough animal protein, and I know that that's a tough one for some people to begin to think about, then I do recommend that for optimal mental health. And the reason why is that only animal foods contain every nutrient the brain needs in its proper form and without antinutrients and toxins. There are a few in dairy and eggs we could talk about, but really when I talk about animal foods, I'm really primarily emphasizing meat, seafood, poultry, and eggs if you tolerate them. These are very nutritious, metabolically very safe, and they are also very healthy for you. They also are very healthy for your metabolism because they don't raise your blood sugar levels. So these foods are they nourish, energize, and protect your brain in an optimal fashion. And there really isn't any plant food capable of doing that. And if you don't make the core of your diet animal foods, then you will not be able to optimally care for your brain. You can try to supplement your way around it. That's your choice. We just don't. As far as I can tell, that's not going to be as good.
Now, there are many people eating a plant-based diet, a vegan diet, a vegetarian diet, because they are under the false assumption currently that it's the healthiest way for humans to eat. That I think those people, it's just a matter of time before they transition to a proper human diet, because they're actually thinking about their diet and what they should eat and what they should avoid. And the more research they do, they're going to come around to knowing that what a proper human diet is. But what about the people? How do you, if you have a patient who's an ethical vegan, for ethical, moral reasons, they eat a plant-based diet, what's the conversation like where you're like, yes, I understand, but we're talking about your mental health here. How would that conversation go as you try to gently, lovingly convince them your brain needs animal fats and animal proteins?
Yeah, no, and I've had, countless conversations with people who prefer not to eat animals, especially all my years as a college psychiatrist, and especially at Smith College, a women's college in Massachusetts. Plant-based diets were very, very popular there, and not necessarily for health reasons. Most young people aren't particularly focused on their health, but really for compassionate reasons. And so I had a lot of conversations with young people about how they could improve the brain healthiness of their diet while still honoring their compassionate goals. And so some of the things that we would talk about would be, for example, well, how would you feel about including some eggs in your diet, or humanely raised animals? How would you feel about maybe including some shellfish in your diet? How would you feel about, instead of the flax seeds or walnuts that you're using to try to get omega-3s, how would you feel about using an algae-based DHA, EPA, omega-3 supplement? Because the omega-3 fats that are in plant foods are the wrong kind. It's difficult to impossible for us to use them in our bodies and brains. So, and then I also would have a conversation with them about the things in their diet that they should take out, that everybody needs to take out, as you were just saying. Whether you are eating mostly plants, mostly animals, doesn't matter. The grains, the legumes, the refined carbohydrates, the vegetable oils, the modern processed foods, alcohol. There are lots of ways you can make a diet healthier for your brain, even if you don't feel comfortable including animal foods. And then if you really still, don't want to include any animal foods in the diet, some conversations about what you need to supplement and why, and how important that is. Because I had lots of students that I talked to over the years, and not just students, but patients as well from my other practices, who they might have been supplementing B12, but often not much more than that.
Yep.
And B12, the problems with the holes in a vegan diet go far beyond B12. And so there are so many other nutrients that people need to be aware of. And also the anti-nutrients. So removing some of the foods in the diet which are working against their ability to extract iron out of the foods they're eating, to extract zinc out of the foods they're eating, calcium, magnesium. Some of the amino acids are harder to extract if you're eating a plant-based diet. So just a lot of education and support, and meeting people where they are. That's what a good psychiatrist anyway does.
Yeah.
Where are you, and how can we come closer together?
Yeah. And here's the question from one of our viewers, and I get this question all the time in our private group, because once somebody adopts a proper human diet on the spectrum, and I love how you break it out in your book, paleo, low carb, keto, carnivore. That's kind of the spectrum where if you want your best mental health, that's where you're going to have to wind up eating. And so all the time when somebody starts keto, ketovore, carnivore, or really whole food, low carb, paleo, their mental health improves. And then all of a sudden they feel so much better, but they're taking 1, 2, 3, 4 different psychiatric medications. And they're like, okay, can I come off this now? So the answer is no, not without the help of your doctor. So here's a question from Vicky, presently on Buspar 30 twice a day and Wellbutrin XL 300 a day. Is it possible to come off these? If so, how? That's the word. How is the best way? Thank you for the question, Vicky.
Thank you, Vicky. So Buspar is a commonly prescribed medicine for anxiety. Wellbutrin is a commonly prescribed medication for depression. These are relatively straightforward medicines to work with, so that's a good thing. But the first thing is, as Dr. Berry said, never stop any medication abruptly. The other thing to say is never stop any medication on your own. Make sure that you're doing this with the support and active involvement of your prescribing practitioner, because these medications, when you reduce the dosage, you can have a lot of withdrawal effects. And some of these effects can be really uncomfortable and sometimes dangerous. So depending on the medication and depending on how fast you're lowering the dose. So please don't do this on your own. And so there are a few principles that I use in my work. A, never change more than one medicine at a time. B, go slow, very slow. And C, use really small dosage drops, the smallest that you can. So be patient with it. And so there's some guiding principles there that most psychiatrists will follow and other prescribing practitioners will follow. But it's a little bit different in every case. So I can't, for example, tell you, Vicky, that, well, I would start with this medicine and then I would lower it by this much and then I would wait this amount of time, because it's very personalized. It depends on so many different things about you, how the medicines affect you, how sensitive you are to them, and how and what you take them for, and what kinds of things you're going to want to watch out for, and other aspects of your health. So lots of things to consider, and that's why it really does need to be personalized, and it does need to be, in partnership with your prescribing practitioner.
Yes, excellent. I love that answer. And I know as a family physician during my training, I actually had one of my mentors was a family physician, but he had done an extra year fellowship in psychiatry, and his entire practice was mental health. He had shifted away from family medicine. That's one of the things I love about family medicine is you can do that. You can get an extra year or two fellowship, and then you can shift your entire practice if you're kind of bored with the sinus infections and hypertension. And so I really got a lot of decent training in mental health and all the pharmaceuticals. But what I, looking back now, noticed I didn't get any training on whatsoever was the withdrawal effects of many of the psychiatric medications, even in medications that are not habit forming, not addictive in any way. I think probably the average person understands, if you take a high dose of Xanax 4 times a day for a year, it's going to suck to come off that. It's going to take a while. But other medications like the psychotropics, Lexapro, Effexor, things that have no addiction, no abuse potential whatsoever. I've known people in our private group who have had to literally go to a compounding pharmacy and have a liquid version made so that they can almost microdose decrease to come off some of these medications. In your psychiatry training, did you get any inkling that many of these things are super, super hard to come off of once you're on them?
Yeah, it's such a good point. No, we didn't get any education about deprescribing medications. And so I learned that by doing. So I left residency and opened a practice. I worked in a community health clinic. I worked at a local hospital, and I also worked in a small private practice. I did a variety of things. And I learned by practicing clinical practice. So I learned from my patients by listening to them, by believing them when they said that when I changed the dose by a certain amount, that was really uncomfortable. And I just learned by doing. And so I think there may be more information about this available to psychiatry trainees now than there was, when I was training back in the early 2000s. I hope so anyway. But you learn very quickly. If you're paying attention and you trust your patients and listen to them, you learn very quickly that even the seemingly most benign psychiatric medication, maybe it's Zoloft, something, some garden variety, very straightforward SSRI, serotonin medication for
The kind
depression.
of stuff that people joke we should put that in the water. That
Oh
kind
my
of
gosh, please
yeah.
no. And and so, but some of the antidepressants, as you mentioned, Effexor, Paxil, these can be really, really difficult to come off of. It's not impossible. It just takes patience. And so you can come off of these. It just takes patience. But if you drop the dose too quickly, horrendous side effects, things like these brain zaps, very common, feels like electrical shocks going through your brain, nightmares, night sweats, dizziness, severe headaches, difficulty concentrating, irritability, agitation, just gastrointestinal issues, on and on and on. Flu-like symptoms, it will look for all the world like you have a case of the flu. You will even go, and this has happened to many of my patients, they'll go to their primary care doctor. Their primary care doctor will say, "You have the flu." Say, "No, it's just that they've been away for the weekend and they've forgotten their antidepressant medication." So these are profound. It's a shock to the brain and body when you abruptly stop these medications or drop the dosages too quickly.
Yep, and I've seen that multiple times. What are the top 3 seemingly innocuous mental health medications that are just boogers to help people come off of? Which are the 3 that pop to the top of your mind?
Paxil, Effexor, and Cymbalta. So these are all antidepressants that are, because they're a little bit more complicated in their chemistry than some of the other antidepressants, they tend to be much more difficult to taper off of.
Yep, that's been my experience as well.
Mm-hmm.
And many patients, especially if they don't have a good psychiatrist on board, they will misequate those withdrawal symptoms as, oh, I must need the medicine because when I try to decrease the dose, I feel worse. But very often that's not the case at all. It's just they're having these atypical withdrawal symptoms.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Dr. Berry, because that is a very, very common scenario where someone will come to me and they'll say, "Oh, I can't stop that medication. I need that because as soon as I stop it, my depression comes back or my anxiety comes back or what have you." And then I will always ask, next question, how exactly did you stop it? How, over what period of time? How did you do it? And so what happens is when people drop the dose too quickly, then you'll get these sometimes within 2 or 3 days, almost always within 2 or 3 days of dropping that dose, you'll start to feel miserable emotionally and physically. And a lot of people will think, "Oh, that must mean that I need this medication in order to be well." That's not what that means. Now, there's a chance that that's what it means, but that's unlikely. If it happens within 2 to 3 days of a dosage drop, it's almost always withdrawal. And therefore, all that means is that you've dropped the dosage too quickly. So you just go back to the previous dose and you'll feel better within a few hours. And then you have to go back to the drawing board and make a different tapering plan that's going to be gentler for you.
Yes, I love that. And you mentioned earlier about there's really no evidence supporting a plant-based or a vegan diet for any psychiatric condition. And every day, as well as I do, I read Psychology Today and many other pseudo journals and actual journals of mental health. All the time you see headlines that depression, anxiety, OCD, ADHD are improved by going vegan. And so explain to the viewers who are not epidemiologists, they're not statisticians, they don't understand the difference between this research or that research. Why are these articles everywhere? Why are we seeing a new article every day about how a plant-based diet helps your mental health in this way or the other? What are these authors basing this on?
Good. So it's really important for people to understand that there has not yet been any clinical study, any experimental human study where you take a group of people and you switch them to a plant-based diet and their XYZ PDQ gets better, their depression, their psychotic symptoms, their mood swings, their attention problems, their memory. There's never been a clinical trial, a human experiment of a vegan or vegetarian diet improving a psychiatric diagnosis. That's never been done. When you see headlines like that, that type of information is coming from really from wishful thinking and wild guesses of nutrition epidemiology. It's this kind of questionnaire-based study that is, asking lots and lots of people what they eat and asking them what to remember, how to remember what they ate, and then report their mood. And then the people who are doing the study are looking for patterns in the answers to try to support what their beliefs are about what they hope to see. So that's a theory. They'll look for the pattern and they might see a connection. It's usually a very, very, very tiny connection. They might see some hint of a connection of some kind. And instead of testing that, science requires 2 steps. You've got your theory, your observation. Oh, that's interesting. I wonder if people who eat more berries have, less risk of dementia. Okay, interesting theory. Okay, you don't publish that theory until you test it. You have to find out, okay, let's take a group of people, change their diet, and see what happens. We'll give them more berries and we'll see if their memory improves. That is not what's happening. They're publishing after the first step and they're not doing the second step. The science is a theory and then an experiment. What all those headlines you see, that's the theory. That's someone's wishful thinking about what they'd like you to believe. They haven't tested it yet. So good science is supposed to bring you closer to the truth. You're supposed to test your theory to see if it actually holds water. And if the experiment doesn't work, then you have to change your theory. If you never do the experiment, you can keep believing your theory for the rest of your life, and you'll never be corrected. So this
and keep publishing about it, and keep getting paid to write books about it, et cetera, et cetera. And when I first started recommending keto and carnivore to my patients, I recommended it to a very few limited patients who had severely high BMIs, were metabolically sickened to death. And they started to get better. And so then as a clinician, I'm like, well, okay, I'm really feeling a signal here, feedback from these patients. I'm going to start recommending it to more or less metabolically ill patients. And again, I got that same signal. Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And here's just one example. Jennifer, I had PTSD and clinical depression to the point I was praying for the sweet release of death. And Dr. Ede, you know that's not uncommon in people with mental health disorders. Keto carnivore completely took me back to my joyous prior self, not just back to normal, but back to joy. I love this comment, and I hear this all the time in our keto carnivore community. How often, and also let me tell people who aren't doctors, this is why you're a doctor, is because you want to make this happen for people. That's why we went to medical school. What do you think about this comment, and how many of you heard like it?
First of all, Jennifer, congratulations. I'm so, so happy for you. That's wonderful to go from the depths of the despair like that to joy. And I hear this all the time. Until I started practicing using nutrition principles in my practice, nutrition and metabolic principles. So I use, as you said before, I use paleo diets, ketogenic diets, carnivore diets in my work. That's the foundation of my work. I hear these comments all the time from people, which I never heard before when I was practicing in the usual way with medications and psychotherapy. I never heard anybody say, I feel joyful, or I feel better than I ever have before in my life, and I hear this all the time. I don't just feel better, I feel better than I ever have felt before.
Yes.
And so it's not just that the absence of symptoms. So medications sometimes, under certain circumstances, can reduce your symptoms. But because they're not treating the root cause of the symptoms, they can't completely remove the symptoms, and they can't allow you to flourish or thrive and be your best self. And you will, of course, you'll pay a price for whatever relief you do get for those in side effects.
Yes. And many patients, they like their doctor, and they don't disappoint their doctor. And so when their doctor prescribes a new medication, they know the doctor believes in the medicine, or they wouldn't have prescribed it. And so then when they have their follow-up appointment and they're like, well, is this helping? A lot of people will be like, yeah, I think it's helping, maybe helping a little. Yeah, I think it's helping. But to use words like joyous,
right?
That's not a word a patient's going to use to placate their doctor and say, "Oh yes, doc, yeah, this means this actually worked."
Yes, and until you practice this way, you don't realize that this is possible. And there's a lot of skepticism among my colleagues about the kind of work that I and a small but growing number of other psychiatrists do in this field, because they can't believe it's possible because they've never seen it. And until you practice this way, you won't see it. And so it sounds hard to believe, but it really, and this is why I think the reason I wrote this book is because most people out there with mental health conditions think they've tried everything and that nothing works, and they start to lose hope. And I want you to know that if you haven't tried these really solid, logical, biological interventions, they're powerful root cause strategies. If you haven't tried these yet, you don't know yet what's possible. So, please don't give up. Please, you deserve to try. I mean, we're talking 6 to 12 weeks on the outside, really, of trying a different way of eating. And I think you're really worth it.
Yes, absolutely. And let's dig into that a little more, because sorry about the dog.
That's great.
I don't think that many people believe you. I think there are a subset of people with severe mental illness watching this right now going, whatever, there's no way, right? And let's tell us about one or two cases where you have seen, because I've seen people literally hospitalized with severe depression to the point where they don't bathe anymore. They don't care. They don't eat because they literally have lost any desire to be alive. And I know that can happen in multiple different mental health disorders. Schizophrenia can be so severe that you can't literally perform any of your activities of daily living because there's just no point. Give us a story or two where it's just beyond the pale. That like nobody expected this person to ever have a joyous life again.
Yeah, so I could tell you many stories, and I put some stories in the book as well for different types of conditions, so people can see early dementia, decades of anxiety, decades of depression, panic attacks, bipolar disorder. I mean, just lots of different examples in the book so that you can maybe see yourself in one of these examples. But I will tell you a story that's not in the book. Because it was one of the stories that surprised me. And so this is a wonderful woman in her 70s. She has allowed me to share her story, so I can tell you the story, but I can't tell you her name. So I call her Bella. So Bella in her 70s, 4 years or so, maybe more, her daughter consulted with me about her mom because she wanted to know if a ketogenic diet might help her mom, who had lived with at least 40 years then of bipolar disorder and multiple medications, hospitalized twice every year like clockwork, every winter, every summer for 2 to 3 months with manic symptoms, very high energy symptoms, a lot of anxiety, unable to sleep, really obsessive thinking. And so she was hospitalized, decades, twice a year. And on very high doses of antipsychotic medication called clozapine, which is the most powerful antipsychotic that we have available to us. A smaller dose, about 200 milligrams of Seroquel or quetiapine, another antipsychotic. The clozapine was up about 550 milligrams, I believe, so high dose.
Wow.
And a tiny dose of lamotrigine, 50 milligrams. So an antidepressant mood stabilizer medicine, very low dose. She'd been on these medicines for a long time. They'd all been optimized to the hilt. They couldn't really do much more. So when she would be hospitalized, they really would just kind of keep her in the hospital until things quieted down, and then they would send her back home. And they really couldn't do much with the medicine. So this most recent hospitalization, just before her mother contacted me, they had used electroconvulsive therapy, multiple rounds of ECT, or what's used to be called shock therapy, to try to help her. And it really did almost nothing. So, and then, eventually she started to feel a little better, as she often does after a couple of months, and she was sent back home, but still very ill, and very anxious and fearful and paranoid. over the recent years, as she entered her 70s, she'd started to become more paranoid. She'd never really had that issue before. It was always mania, never really paranoia, never really even real depression, actually. So she had started to worry that whenever she had misplaced an item in her apartment, she lived alone in an apartment building, that someone had broken into her apartment and stolen the item. And she was inconsolable about this. So she'd call her daughter, and her daughter would say, "Mom, I think you might have just misplaced it." And she'd say, "Oh, no, I'm sure someone broke in." So her daughter had cameras installed in her apartment to try to reassure her mother that this wasn't happening, but she couldn't be reassured. So this was still how she was feeling, when she came out of the hospital this most recent time, 4 years before we started working together. So she said, well, the ketogenic diet helped my mom. And thinking to myself, I'm thinking, 40 plus years of mania, severe, all these medications. I thought to myself, the chances are small. But I share this with everybody who works with me. I always say, I don't know. Let's find out what's possible for you. We don't know unless we try, right? Because that's absolutely, that is true, right? So she started a very strict ketogenic diet, meaning she would adhere to it to the letter. And 2 weeks later, she started to feel so much better. She was no longer paranoid. She was getting up at 10:30 in the morning instead of sleeping until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Her mood was good. Her energy was good. She was able to read again and remember stories and participate in conversations in a way she never had for all those years. And it's a highly educated woman who had essentially been intellectually disabled by her psychiatric illness for decades. And, to sort of to comment, as your previous viewer was saying, Joy, she said, this diet is wonderful. Everything's coming up roses, so she remains on the diet to this day. She actually eats a carnivore diet now, and in her mid 70s, and loves it. And this is really the first time over the past 4 years she has not been hospitalized twice a year. Where she hasn't. This is what she had come to expect. So change, hope is possible no matter what. And that study we published, I think we might have talked about it when I was on your program last time a while back. We published a study where 31 patients with severe chronic schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and major depression on an average of 5 medications in treatment for an average of 10 years started a ketogenic diet. And within 3 weeks, all of them improved, and 44% of them achieved clinical remission. So it doesn't matter how long you've been ill, what your diagnosis is, how many medications you were taking. I am telling you that hope is on the menu. It's worth trying these approaches no matter who you are. And I explain, how to be careful about it and what you need to watch out for and who shouldn't do this. But for most people, this is a very, very worthwhile strategy to consider.
No, I totally agree. And the beauty of what you are recommending, this is not some weird chemical, new FDA approved toxic drug. That's not what it is. This is not some line of supplements. This is literally food. Basically, Dr. Ede is telling you to eat real food that humans have eaten for a long damn time, and to remove all of the pseudo foods that humans have only eaten for a few decades or a few generations. That's literally it. And so within just weeks, and our mutual good friend, Dr. Chris Palmer, who wrote Brain Energy, he tells stories of people who were completely institutionalized, in some cases for decades. As soon as they adopted a high-fat ketovore carnivore, within weeks, they're able to be discharged back to their family, and in some cases even have part-time jobs. This is people who could not live alone. And so the reason I wanted you to tell a story like that is, what I want people to understand is it works for people like that. And so if you've just got, mild to moderate depression, anxiety, ADHD, OCD, any of these things, and you're like, I'm not, I've never been institutionalized. It's really going to help you because you don't have as far to travel to get back to normal. one thing I find, another common question that I get very often in our private group is, I'm eating what Dr. Berry calls a proper human diet, what you call quiet paleo, keto, quiet carnivore. And now I feel so much better, but I'm on all these medicines and I can't find a doctor. Yeah, that's the one. And so Eniko is on a couple, really 3 medications, all 4 really,
Yeah.
that can be real boogers to get off of.
Right.
Find a doctor to help. What does Eniko need to do? How do you, and so what if you can't find a psychiatrist who's like, oh yeah, I know, I understand deprescribing. I can help you with that. What if the psychiatrist you have currently is like, I don't really deprescribe. I don't see any, utility in it. What should Eniko do?
Eniko, go to my website. It's called diagnosisdiet.com, or put my name in, Georgia Ede in the search and website. And there's a tab at the top of the website called Directory, Clinician Directory. This is a free international database where you can search by your country or what kind of, I would search by prescriber if I were you, to see somebody who prescribes medications. And so you can see if there's anybody in your area who can work with you. And so this directory, it's free to search, and it's also free if there are any practitioners listening who practice this way, it's free to list. This directory is specifically for mental health, not general low carb for weight loss and so forth. It's specifically people who are ready, willing, and able to help you get onto or stay on or help you get off your medications in the context of a ketogenic diet. So please see if there's anybody near you in the directory. It's growing every day, so check back if you don't see somebody.
I love that. What about salt, Dr. Ede? Is there any utility to eating a low salt diet, or have you actually seen improvement by people currently on a low salt diet increasing the amount of salt? What about other minerals? How much of this is a mineral deficiency or a mineral depletion? Is there any of that going on here?
Well, depending on which mineral we're talking about, potentially. So, most people don't have a sodium deficiency. The kidney, as you know, will regulate sodium without error. And so you don't really need to worry that you're going to be running low on sodium in most cases, unless you're taking a particular medicine or have a particular type of health condition. Most of us don't have to worry about sodium unless we're transitioning to a ketogenic or carnivore diet, in which case you do need to be very careful to replace actively. Make sure that you're getting enough sodium to help you through that transition phase, and potentially longer than that, depending on who you are. But sodium's not the only mineral. So we've got zinc, we've got iodine, we've got calcium, we've got magnesium, we've got iron. These minerals are essential. And if we think about iron deficiency, my gosh, 20% of women of reproductive age around the world, on average, iron deficient. This is unacceptable. This is not normal. And if you have, and we just think of it as, oh, of course they have iron deficiency. They have periods. That's not the way nature meant it to be. We're not designed to be iron deficient. That makes no sense. So the diet we're eating is often too low in iron, and B, contains too many anti-iron foods. So this is really important, because if you have iron deficiency, I like to say, you don't just have a blood problem, you have a brain problem. Brain needs iron to make neurotransmitters and to make energy. So, and the brain's more sensitive to low iron levels than your breathing and your blood system is, your circulatory system. So iron deficiency does affect the brain, especially, no matter where you are in life, but especially the first 1,000 days of life when the brain is developing. It's absolutely crucial. You won't get another chance to build those circuits that form the foundation of our intelligence. So iron is extremely important, and most of us are told to be afraid of it, be afraid of iron, and worry about iron overload. Iron overload is much far less common than iron deficiency. So yes, minerals are crucial.
Now, you mentioned earlier anti-nutrients in certain foods. How big of a part are oxalates, lectins, phytoestrogens? Are these things playing a part? Is that part of the reason that we see so much improvement when somebody adopts a ketogenic or a carnivore diet?
Yeah, and so a big difference between ketogenic and carnivore. So, assuming if we're talking about ketogenic, meaning an omnivorous ketogenic diet, we're eating plants and animals, versus a carnivorous ketogenic diet. So yes. So there hasn't been a lot of formal study of this particular question, but I can tell you that as you know, from a theoretical standpoint, there's a lot of reason to believe that these plant defense molecules could be causing more problems than they solve, and they certainly weren't. The plant doesn't make them with our good health in mind. The plant makes these chemicals to defend itself, and rightly so. It should, of course, it's doing that. But these chemicals aren't there for our good health. So, for people there, I have quite a few people in my practice, and there are lots of anecdotes, real stories, real experiences of people on social media and in other people in my colleagues' practices who they'll switch to a ketogenic diet for mental health. Now, a lot of people do get tremendous benefit and often and even completely resolve a serious mental health condition. That's even possible with a ketogenic diet, but some people don't. Some people don't respond or don't respond fully to a ketogenic diet. And in those cases, what I recommend is to try, and I recommend this in the book as well, consider a carnivore diet, at least as an experiment, to see whether the issue might be that you've got a lot of chemicals in your diet, natural chemicals from plants that are working against you, and see if that's the issue. So I think this is really well worth exploring if you haven't responded much at all to a ketogenic diet. And it's just that some of us are very, very sensitive, or we've accumulated some gut damage or metabolic damage or immune system damage where we don't tolerate diversity of plant foods the way as well as other people do. So. Yeah. And I think that everyone's a little different in this regard. So, but yes, absolutely, these plant molecules are to be eyed with suspicion. They're on the list of culprits. They should always be on the list of culprits.
Yes, I totally agree. And I've seen that as well in the people that we coach in our private group. Some people, when they adopt a ketogenic diet that's omnivorous, usually meat heavy, but still quite a few veg, they'll improve a little, but not much. And then when they try carnivore, it's like somebody flipped on a light switch. And I think that the normal distribution curve applies to this. I think all things in human physiology, everybody falls on a normal distribution curve, right? And there are some people that need to be carnivores in order to have the best mental health. They just need to be carnivores. Some people don't. But I think everyone needs to do that experiment just to see what benefits that they get. Now, you've mentioned fat a couple of times, and I'm a big fan of high-fat carnivore and high-fat keto, especially for mental health. Do you agree with that? How much fat? And then obviously we both agree on animal fat. That's the fat that you need. But do you think there's a place for really recommending even more fat for many people with mental health conditions?
Yeah, so a lot of questions wrapped up in that question. So one is that, fat, we think of fat as, okay, fat is a source of energy. Well, yes, of course, you need energy in your diet. If you're trying to lose weight, you might want less of that energy to come from your plate. You might want more of it to come from your body. But we're not talking about weight loss. We're talking about brain health today. So in terms of brain health, there are two things about fat to know. And one is that the ratio of, if you're eating a ketogenic or carnivore diet, the ratio of fat to protein can make a difference for some people. Meaning that if you don't feel well on, just kind of eating to satiety, the animal foods that are naturally available in your grocery store without thinking about or counting macros or anything like that, and you don't feel your best, you might want to try shifting that ratio so that you're having more fat and less protein. You still want to get enough protein, but sort of just dialing the fat up and dialing the protein down a little bit, that sort of thing. But the other thing to say about it is that fat is a nutrient. Fat is loaded with nutrients. Animal fat and plant fats have nutrients in them, and you don't want to skimp on those. And there are some nutrients that we can't absorb unless we consume fat with them. Vitamins A, D, E, and K. These are actually hormones. These are fat-soluble hormones. So it's really important to give fat the respect it deserves, and to eat fats from healthy whole foods and not the refined fat. So you do need fat. How exactly much you need is going to depend on the specifics of your situation, but it's always worth a try, as you were just saying, Dr. Berry, if you're not feeling quite right, to dial the fat up and see if that solves the problem.
Yes. Another compound question. Do the psychological and psychiatrical organizations, associations, do they have a dietary strategy that they recommend to patients, kind of as a blanket recommendation? And then also, what kind of feedback have you gotten from colleagues in psychiatry when they find out what kind of diets you recommend for patients?
Yeah. So the good news, when I realized this about 10 years ago or so, when I was first branching into, I mean, at that point, I'd been practicing this way for a little while already, but at a certain point, as I started practicing this way, I started to realize, wait a minute, there are no official guidelines, about what I'm supposed to recommend to my patients for what a brain healthy diet should be. And when I realized that, I felt it was very freeing, because nobody had really asked this question before. What is a brain healthy diet? And I thought, well, I want to answer that question. That's what I want to understand. And that's what my work has been all about for the last 15 years. And that's what the book is about. The book is about, what is a brain healthy diet? What does the brain need and why? So what is a brain healthy diet? And so now recently, in the past few years, there's a new branch of psychiatry called nutritional psychiatry. And most of the thought leaders in nutritional psychiatry are recommending a Mediterranean diet as the best diet for the brain. And there are lots of reasons why, and I argue this in the book, why yes, it's a little better, but you can do so much more. So there are no guidelines, and so that's fantastic. And the second, that's freeing, because cardiologists their hands are tied in a lot of cases, right? So now the second question is, how do colleagues respond? And I think it really depends on the colleague. So I think, generally speaking, there's a lot of skepticism just in the general psychiatric, my peers and the people in the American Psychiatric Association and so forth. They're really not thinking about these as exciting, paradigm shifting interventions. A lot of skepticism. But there are a growing number of psychiatrists and other mental health practitioners who are so excited and so relieved to find out that there's something else they can do for all of their patients who aren't getting better. I mean, most psychiatrists' practices, including my own, filling up until I started practicing differently, filling up with people who weren't getting better.
Yeah.
And this is really, it's heartbreaking and frustrating and distressing for both the patient and the psychiatrist. And when I started figuring some of this, figuring out some of these different strategies and started incorporating my work, it was such a joy to have something else to offer people. Because I'd started running out of ideas. I tried every medicine, every type of therapy, and it doesn't take that long to run out of ideas in psychiatry. So I do think that there's a growing number of people who are excited. And I teach a training program, and this is how I know this. I teach a training program, CME training program for clinicians, and how to use ketogenic diets to help people with mental health problems. And it's wonderful, because the clinicians who come to that course, they're open-minded, they're excited, they're curious, they're just hungry for this knowledge, because they care about their patients, and they don't just want to cover up symptoms. Right. They want to help them get healthier and well. And I like to say, let's make ourselves obsolete.
Yeah, exactly right. And I love it that you run that training course. The book is called Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind. There's a link in the show notes. I saw somebody in the comments asking what the name of the book was. Dr. Ede, since you train other healthcare providers, mental health care providers, how to use and implement a ketogenic diet, let's talk to medical students, psychiatric residents, family practice residents, primary care residents in training, new nurse practitioners, physician's assistants, and then mental health care nurses. How they're watching this and they're like, oh my God, this sounds really powerful. This sounds like this is real and this could actually help my patients. What are their first steps to say, okay, I need to learn about this and then I need to start recommending this to my patients? Give them a little guidance. How can they get started?
Yeah, so a few places I will direct you. So you can certainly come to my website. Lots of free information there. I've been writing about these issues for a very long time. The book, obviously, I think will be a useful resource for you if you're interested in that. The Metabolic Mind website, which was just completely redesigned, is a beautiful home for all things metabolic psychiatry, meaning ketogenic diets and other metabolic strategies. It includes inspirational videos, stories of real people who have healed themselves from mental illnesses, the latest science, interviews, expert interviews, patient interviews, all the latest research. And so it's a wonderful place to go. It's called Metabolic Mind. Please do visit their website. And that's a completely free service. And then there are also two new academic, well, one's newer than the other. There's an academic center at Stanford, the Stanford Metabolic Psychiatry Department, under the leadership of Dr. Shivani Sethi, was founded in 2015. They have a website and they have a clinic. And then just the last week or so, Dr. Chris Palmer at Harvard started a metabolic and mental health center, which will be rapidly growing. So keep an eye on that project as well. So this is really a very rapidly growing field, a really exciting field. It's really a great time to be a mental health practitioner because, after decades of standing still, we're really taking a quantum leap forward.
And there are a lot of studies ongoing right now about using a diet that allows your body to produce ketones. That is what a ketogenic diet is.
Yeah.
To treat mental health. Last time I looked on clinicaltrials.gov, there's over 400 trials that have either been registered or are actually ongoing right now with results to come. How excited are you about that? Because, the ketogenic diet as something that people talk about, that fad's kind of waning. But when you look into the research arm of this, keto's not fading in any way whatsoever. It's on fire right now. I mean, what all is being researched right now in the way of mental health with regards to a ketogenic or a carnivore diet?
Bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, ADHD, PTSD, major depression, substance abuse, dementia, Alzheimer's disease, really just about any mental health condition you can imagine is now being explored in terms of a potential target for the ketogenic diet. And why? In ketogenic diet, we think about it as a weight loss diet, but the ketogenic diet was originally designed in 1921 to stabilize brain chemistry. It was originally designed to try to stop seizures in children before effective seizure medications became available. And it works. More than 50% of people with seizures have more than a 50% reduction in their seizures on a ketogenic diet, and more than 10% seizures completely stop. So if that doesn't tell you that this diet stabilizes brain chemistry, I don't know what more evidence you would need. So it makes sense. This diet is good for the brain. It calms the brain, stabilizes the brain, heals the brain. I mean, there are studies, we know for, over 100 years now with epilepsy. Some children with epilepsy only needed to be on the diet for a year or two, and then they could come off the diet. I don't recommend this for my adults, generally speaking. Kids are metabolically flexible, and these are seizures. This is a different story. But the diet was so healing that they were able to come off the diet and stay off the diet and remain seizure-free. Now, in my adult patients, I'm an adult psychiatrist. I don't treat children, but most of my adults will see their symptoms unfortunately come back when they stop the ketogenic diet. We have a lot less flexibility, I think, as we get older. But that's okay. If the diet works for you, in most cases, you're going to want to stay on it because it feels so good to feel good.
It sure does. Well said. Dr. Ede, we're coming up on the hour. I want to just thank you. It's an honor to be able to chat with you like this. You're doing such brilliant work. For anybody out there who's just right on the verge of losing all hope, wrap this up and talk to them one-on-one and help them understand absolutely there's hope. You can get better.
Listen, I know because I talk to people every day who feel like they have tried everything and they feel like, well, it's not going to work for them. How could it work for them? They're on too much medication, or it's been too many years, or it's going to be too hard, or they're not going to be able to find somebody to help them. And I just want you to know that that's all changing now in terms of it is easier to find somebody to help you. We have a lot more information available. I put as much information in this book as I possibly could fit to help you, to give you, all the guidance I could possibly fit inside. And like I was saying before, it doesn't matter how many medicines you're taking or how long you've been unwell or what the nature of the diagnosis is. There is hope because these interventions, I know it sounds, it's just changing your diet. These are powerful biochemical interventions. These are powerful therapies that go right to the root causes of mental health problems. So these diets help in ways that no medication can.
True.
So you deserve to see what that feels like for you.
I love that. That's beautiful. So guys, the book is Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind. It's available everywhere. There is an Audible for us, those of us with ADHD. So I'm currently listening to the Audible. I highly recommend this. Can't recommend it more highly than I currently do. If you love someone with a mental health condition, please get this book into their hands. Dr. Georgia Ede, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Dr. Berry, for everything you do for helping people understand what a real human diet is supposed to look like, proper human diet. And thank you for allowing me to talk with your viewers today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure and honor. And don't forget to share this, guys, because there are people out there who need this information. Thank you very much for hanging out. See you next time.